I want to touch a bit about comedy. A lot of people speak about this man, and when they speak about him, they talk about him glowingly. A lot of people, even to a fault, when you speak about the late Gbenga Adeboye, and they talk about the fact that he was a comedian ahead of his time. So I think one day I did go to YouTube and I went to search on him. Let me watch or listen to some of it. I remember going to bed still laughing hard, cracking at his jokes. And it was unbelievable how good he was at such a, let's just say people do think that people get more creative as the years roll by. The kind of creativity in his comedy was so much. And I'm sure you would have had, front row seats to listening to him, maybe not physically, but his works there. What would you say about Gbenga Adeboye as a comedian?
Gbenga Adeboye was a genius. But even before Gbenga Adeboye, there was Baba Salah.
Yes, sir.
There was Ajima Jashon. There was Benja. There was Aderukmoko. All these were comedians, people who used the parody to reflect society, and they were all very successful. But like I said, Gbenga Adeboye is in a class of his own, because all the people I've named earlier, Baba Salah, Benja, they presented their bodies. They were on stage, they were in film. But Gbenga Adeboye started with radio. So you didn't even see his face.
You just heard his voice.
You just heard his voice. And it took some time before you could even recognize who Gbenga Adeboye was. But his depth of understanding, his depth of storytelling, his ability to take you onto a cliffhanger and drop you.
Yes.
It's uncanny. And it is so, Gbenga Adeboye is somebody I knew personally. He was a very good friend. And it was such a tragedy when he passed.
I remember I still remember when he passed. I was on holidays in my auntie's house. I was freshly into high school, or I think I was still in primary school. I'm not particularly sure. And then every single channel for like 2 weeks, we're talking about Gbenga Adeboye. And I was like, who is this guy? I was a small boy, I was like, who is this guy? So over the years, when my interest in arts and theater and comedy developed, I began to learn more about it. When I listened to people who had been there before, I remember hearing even Pete Edochie spoke about him. When you hear someone like Pete Edochie speak about him, you're like, okay, it must have been significant across the Yoruba land spectrum into the general face of the whole nation. Yeah. It did carry such an impact. So one would just help but wonder what could have been.
Yeah, he was a genius. He was a genius. And he went abroad, wowed the Nigerian communities in London, in New York, in various parts of the United States, even I think other parts of Europe, to the extent that, when something goes out of Nigeria to the Nigerian diaspora, usually it doesn't stay within Yoruba or Igbo, because all of them are looking for something to relate with home too. Yes. So it's not surprising that people like Peter Edochie, through some means or the other, were able to. I'm not sure whether Peter Edochie speaks Yoruba, and the kind of Yoruba that Gbenga Adeboye speaks, you just need a bit of Yoruba to be able to say what's wrong with this
guy. Yes. Okay. So sir, you've spent a lot of time, like I said again, like you rephrased, behind the scenes of a lot of films. So you've seen people make characters their own. You've seen people redefine roles in which everything about that role becomes synonymous to the person. So when I think about these things, a major question comes into mind. So an iconic question comes up when an iconic movie star appears. Let me use modern times. Niklaus Michelson in the originals. Wentworth Miller in Prison Break. Let me use a more popular one. What's his name again? Jack Sparrow, that's Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean. Let me bring it back home here. Shola Sheboale as Eniola Salami and Tony Tomato in King of Boys and Super Story. These people own these characters so much that they become synonymous. But the question that comes up for me as a lawyer is this. While they own the TV screens, how much of the personality of the character they've embodied do they own?
That's an interesting question. More so from a legal point of view, because as you are talking and naming people from Hollywood, I was just thinking the version here is totally different, because you are seeing somebody that carries a character into 5 different films that are not connected. But he still carries that, and it still goes by the name that he bore or she bore in some other film. So they carry their character, they carry their characterization, and it tends to work because they are totally different of actors and actresses. Many of these Yoruba films, all they have is a synopsis. And each of the characters define their own lines. They devise their own lines. And so it is easy for them to bring their character into the film. Yes, yeah. And whatever the film is, they will still bring their characterization into it. And people are just too happy to see them and see how they manage that characterization in these films. But more in the mold of the example you gave of Hollywood, then you have people like Larry Akinleye, who in Oleku, where he played the uncle of Ajani, and he was trying to get Ajani to get married and intervene between Ajani and his mother, who wants him to get married in time, and he demands the names of his girlfriends and took it to the diviners to tell which one is better. And I had occasion to engage Dr. Larry Akinleye. How did you come about this characterization? He says, whenever I get a script and I read the script, I go back in my mind to my village in Epakpo and identify that character in the village. And I come to the screen like that character. So he has somebody he had experienced in his past, and he just wears the mold of that character, and he presents that person in every way. So, but to now come to the legal question there, for those of our people who carry characters from one production to the another, to another, to another, I think it does present something fundamentally, it has to be addressed fundamentally from a point of view of jurisprudence and other aspects, the philosophical aspect of law and legalism, to determine so who really is this person? Are they just acting in this thing, or are they co-writers of the thing? Yes. And I am sure that just like what happens now with artificial intelligence, you tell some artificial intelligence agent, short story, can you expand it and make a film script of it? And it comes. Yes. So, who now owns the copyright? ChatGPT, or the person that asked the question? So, these are some of the questions that developments, disruptive innovations are bringing about in society. And we all have to come together to answer these questions and devise how we will deal with them. Because some of those things that we have become practiced in dealing with were novel at some point, and we had to devise ways of dealing with them. So that is the reality of living within cultures, fundamentally dynamic, and you will always see something new that you need to adapt to.
Okay. Because the reason why I asked you was because it's one of the things that I've been pondering in my mind. Me being an advocate of creatives, I'm always in the matrix of the entertainment business. I'm always going to be an advocate of the creators, from the music to the to the film script. So, like for example, in music now, when there are two sides of it. There's the sound recording and there's the musical composition. Now, a lot of times, because artists are signed to labels, to promoters who basically have a contract that gives them control and ownership of the masters, excuse me, they control the sound recordings. However, the musical composition, the melody and the lyrics still remain in the hands of the music creator, that's the music artist. So a lot of times when streaming platforms are allocating royalties and payments for the music, they allocate percentages for the sound recordings, and they also allocate percentages for the musical compositions, in which publishers now sign deals with music artists, creators, to act on behalf of them in collecting these royalties in their pockets, which is what has given rise to a market for songwriters, a lot of songwriters too, and even where producers get to share in these royalties. But of course, they first have to be listed as co-writers of the song for them to include them. So I think in the same vein, something like that can be duplicated in the movie industry.
Even in history, there is a dimension that you didn't address. That's the dimension of the person that translates music into writing. Historically, the person that wrote the music, the person that composed, may not get the credit, but it's the person that actually translated it into writing, that wrote it as staff notation, that gets the But with time, that had to be resolved. That no, this is not. You are just a transcriber. This is the person that did the artistic work. But even transcribing music is fundamentally artistic in itself, because you need to understand the nuances of the dynamics of the music, the harmonies, the melodies, the rhythm, everything, the tempo, and all that brought together. They are all elements of aesthetics. So to write, you also need to be a musician. So that gives me the confidence that we were able to resolve that. Gives me the confidence that whatever comes, there will be a way to resolve it. I think it's to you lawyers that the buck stops on your table.
Yes, sir. So I just got something very, how do I put it, in Nexus for that scenario you painted, where a film writer, somebody writes a short idea of a film and then asks AI or ChatGPT to elaborate, and it does, and then gives a full script. And then the question that comes up, that who gets credit, the film producer or ChatGPT? The same thing too in what you've explained about composing the music and transcribing. One of the biggest solutions that came up was when applications and setups were introduced that help compose. For example, a lot of music producers use things like FL Studio, Cubase to make beats. I have a lot of producer friends, so I see them do it. So I think because FL Studio is not human, it's not as if you can go and give credit and say FL Studio did this for me, so something for FL Studio. The credit usually goes directly to the human. And so I'm now thinking, wouldn't the same thing be applicable with ChatGPT? I mean, how much of a human is ChatGPT?
Yeah, there are questions to answer. It's not as though there is a rule now that ChatGPT gets the credit. There are things to be thought of. But when you were talking, it was clear that we were being anthropocentric. That whatever the human contributes, the human gets the lion's share. He's human now. How can you? The computer is not human. The AI is not. Yes. So what does it want? It's all anthropocentricity. But it will take time for us to actually come to terms with the fact that we are not that
Yes.
that these things will outsmart us somewhere along the line.
So, I want to ask two questions about Shawaride, one of, if not the greatest film ever in Nigerian history. A lot of people would argue for that motion. In a London screening of Shawaride, you met somebody called Amanda Velpastor. Apologies for the name if I didn't pronounce it well. And she's an Australian musicologist who was studying the cultural significance of the Bata drumming. Now, can you give us an insight of how that conversation went? That's the general question, but I would also want to understand who a musicologist is as opposed to a musician.
Okay. Well, to start with, Amanda Villepastor is more than a musicologist, ethno-musicologist, but actually was the keyboardist of Boy George. Was Boy George's keyboardist, and he played a few of the rounds. Then got an epiphany and went into study. A musicologist is a person that studies music rather than plays music. I mean, they may play music, but they study music as a human art. Just like somebody who studies fine art is different from somebody who paints. So musicology is the formal study of music, and it has various parts. It has ethnomusicology, for example, which is looking at music from the point of view of certain ethnic groups, how various ethnic groups conceive music and how they practice the making of music. There is a classical musicologist, there is various aspects of the systematic musicology, various aspects of musicology. So that's who a musicologist is. Amanda Villepastor happens to be an ethnomusicologist whose interest was the Bata drumming, particularly by virtue of the fact that you could use the Bata drum to pass messages. You can use it to speak. They talk of talking drums. And for her master's degree, she studied how Bata evolved into Cuba. And for her PhD, she came here to in Osun State, and studied how the Bata is used as a speech surrogate, the means of speaking. And she found similarities and disparities between the practice of Bata here in Nigeria and in Cuba, where slave trade took Bata players. The interesting thing is that the way I met Amanda Villepastor was that we made this the screening of Shawaride at the October Gallery. October Gallery is a, you can say, alternative art gallery in the heart of London, around Holborn. Alternative in the sense that you don't really see European art there. Probably art from Africa, art from Asia, art from other parts, Polynesian art, and that's what you see there. So because of that character, I had the interest of showing Shawaride there, and through the grace of a friend, Ekigbenige, who was working there at that time.
Okay.
She introduced us, and we were able to show Shawaride there. And somewhere along the line, where we had a question time, and somebody asked why we should make a light complexioned woman the choice wife of the king in the film. And well, people answered the questions here and there, and somebody said, well, you know, there's this statement in Yoruba, Akmonbekore, kind of valorizing the light complexion. And somebody else in the audience, in fact, specifically, Mr. Peter Bedijo OBE, Said, but also, there's also Adumaradon.
Yeah.
And this white lady from the back put her hands up, and I recognized her. And he said, I am shocked that in a gathering of Yoruba people, you are arguing about Aponbepore and Adumaradon. Meanwhile, Yoruba says, Iwalewa. And I thought to myself, you are not going anywhere. I'm going to arrest you.
Now that I'm not people of
I'm going to arrest you. And that's how I got into this lifelong friendship with Amanda Vilpastor, with whom I contributed to her magnum opus of the book, Ancient Text Messages of the Yoruba Bata, where she wrote a lot about the Bata drums. She got funding, some grant for her study, and invited me to the UK for a month to sit with her and work with her and try to decipher the coding of a special language used by the Bata drummers, referred to as Eno Bata, which I was able to use my skills in computer science to decode. And which is all very well written and expressed in the book Ancient Messages of the Yoruba Bata. But the more interesting thing is that Shaworode was very, very well received at the October Gallery. In those days, it was when you take a Nigerian film to London, it was an exercise in ghettoization. So we go to Balam, to all these areas where Nigerians congregate, and we go to show in some town halls and show films and produce. But when we went to October Gallery, the place was filled up with Africanists, with Europeans that had worked in Nigeria, just because I have that network. I have access to that network because when I was young, most of my father's staff were Europeans. So I still have contact with all those people. So it was very easy to get people like Frank Speed did not come, but his wife was there. Frank Speed was the medical illustrator at UCH in the late 40s, the early to mid 50s. So people like that, Doig Simmons. So we were able to get the late Lana Sholaru. We got people like that who are Europeans, who are British, but are Nigerians at heart. And they brought in their friends to come and see the kind of films they make in Nigeria. People like Finrie Adeluba, who was the wife of Professor Adeluba, head of the Department of Theatre Arts here. So these were the kind of network we were able to bring. And because we had discussions after, there was very, very active discussions. And a lady by the name of Frances Harding, who was then teaching, I've forgotten the course she was teaching at the School of Oriental and African Studies, then invited TK to come and give a lecture to our students on. So we had experiences like this, which offered intercultural exchanges.
Oh, okay. I would go and research on that book and see a lot on it. Marquee filmmakers like Tunde Kelani and others have delved into the world of film adaptations. That's converting poems into movies too. And I think Mami was one of them. And a lot of people do that. And in recent history, movie producers and movie filmmakers have lazied down into writing fresh scripts and have gone into researching the best of books, the most iconic of books, and turning them into films. So the question here is, at what point should filmmakers strike a balance in interpreting the intentions of the intentions or the stories of a particular book, while and maintaining its originality and adapting it using fresh, iconic, messages there? At what point should this filmmaker strike a balance so that they don't go off the story which the writer and the author is trying to tell, and at the same time still be able to pass the fresh message or the new message they want to pass in the movies that they're shooting?
In answering that question, let me first of all say that Nollywood has deprived itself greatly of the deep value in writing that exists in Nigeria. Nigeria has a Nobel laureate in literature. The late Professor Chinua Achebe was a Nobel nominee. Mike Ben Okri is a Booker Prize winner. What's his name? Niyi Oshundari. We have lots of celebrated writers. Chinwezu, Olarotibi. But somehow, Nollywood does not see those people. And they think all these predictable plots that they put on the screen, that people will say, oh my God, and it does. So, from the point of view of adaptation, Nollywood has not taken due advantage of the depth of writing skills of Nigerian writers. Oh. If there is a filmmaker in Nigeria that has taken that thing to the extreme, it will be Tunde Kelani. Shauride was written by Professor Akim Inshallah. Yes. Oleku, Professor Akim Inshallah. Koshegbe, Professor Akim Inshallah. You talked of Mahami. Ayonimofe was written by Wale Ogunyemi. Mahami was written by Professor Femi Oshofison. So is the latest Cordelia. So Tunde Kelani has taken full advantage of what the Nigerian writing circle offers. And little wonder that he is regarded the way he's regarded. He even took Soyinka's, what's this book, which Kelani produced as a CD Lujinle. I've forgotten. I read the book in the secondary school. I can't remember the name. Oh. So he's gone the full, almost the full hog. I mean, you can't accuse Tunde Kelani now of not giving due regard to the value, to the expertise of Nigerian writers. Yes. That is renowned worldwide, that is respected all around the world. So, for Nollywood, the question you have asked does not even arise because they have not even done adaptations. But the question still remains valid because writing is a form of art. You can adapt a book, a drama piece, a written drama, you can adapt it for stage. You can adapt the same thing for screen, which are different media and bring about different dynamics. The kind of things you can do in film, you may not be able to do on stage because of at one level, the time that you have available to you to change scenes, to change props, to make things, all that, because there's a time limit within which you have to do everything you are doing. On stage, it limits the liberty of what you can do. You now go to film, a totally different medium in which, in film, I've watched the film before, a 1 hour film, in which 3 people were trapped in a lift. One was deaf, one spoke only English, the other spoke only Russian. So the 3 of them could not communicate as you and I would, and yet they survived that 1 hour in a lift. So it now that presents film as a fundamentally visual medium, where you have the capacity to say all you want to say visually. Well, of course, it can be augmented with speech, it can be augmented with sound effects, can be augmented with music, can be augmented with various other sensory excitations. So the question of how faithfully should you repeat what is written, I think it's an open question, because let's look at Oleku. Oleku, TK's Oleku. If you go and read the book Oleku and go and watch the film Oleku, you see that there are differences, and these are due to the latitude that film offers that writing may not offer. So I think it's an open question of how far to go. Whatever you do that will give your audience, your viewers, the depth of pleasure that you set out to do, I think it's game, as long as there's agreement between the original writer of the book and the script writer, the person that did the adaptation.
Yes, because let me call it an entertainment burden for me. Because you look at the greatest movies of the last 20, 30 years. You look at Hunger Games. You look at Harry Potter. You look at Game of Thrones, the best TV series. These were books that were adapted into films, and they top charts for years. They are still talked about for years.
My Fair Lady.
Yes, sir.
Pygmalion.
Yes, sir.
Pygmalion was I think it's Bernard Shaw. It was the book, and it came out as My Fair Lady. And you read Pygmalion, read My Fair Lady, then you see that, wow, look at what the visual medium has done to these different mode, which is a different mode of engaging information.
It's because it's sad, and you always feel like, why can't our Nigerian filmmakers take these blueprints? For example, now this wasn't even a book; it was an occurrence. The movie 76 that depicts a kind of love story that happened in the time where the coup d'etat, the assassination of President Murtala Mohammed was done. Where embedded in that movie was a love story of a woman who went all the way to prove that her husband was innocent and was not among the coup plotters of that era. It was a lovely movie. A lot of people watched it. And up until now, when somebody mentions, have you watched 76? They're like, oh yes, that movie was dope. And using that blueprint and comparing it to the blueprints of the ones that America has done. Because trust me, now, the Hollywood, they've become lazy in creating their own scripts. All they do is go write, copy. They copy from literature, they copy from games, they copy from history and stories. The Greatest Showman was about the life of W.P. Barnum, who was It was a showman in the 80s, and that movie made numbers. Books, a lot of books like this are coming up like that. And I think we have, like you said, we are so rich in literature. I was reading The Passport of Malam Ilya sometimes ago again, and I was mesmerized. I was like, why is this not a movie now?
That is an unfortunate case, because I know how much TK chased Cyprian Ekwensi for Passport of Malam Ilya and his Sokugo antics. But I mean, it's not that Mr. Ekwensi was not willing to, but I mean, the deal didn't occur till he passed.
But he can still be.
I mean, at a point he got, because I used to escort TK to his house in somewhere around Lawansin.
In Lagos, yes.
Yeah. And we talked, and I mean, very, very hilarious man. Gives us drinks, and we talk and say, leave the book, let us talk, let's just enjoy ourselves. And very expressive man. So efforts were made. But also we must give credit to, even though she wrote the book and initiated the film ourselves, like Chimamanda, with
Yes, half of
a
Yellow
Yellow
Sun,
Sun.
yes, sir.
Yeah, and incidentally, one of my students recently was doing her MA thesis on Half of a Yellow Sun, and I was saying, why don't you contrast Half of a Yellow Sun with Sound of Music? And I said,
Oh, yes.
why? I said, oh, Sound of Music is a film set in
War
the Second
eras,
World War.
yes.
And the love issue that came out of that. Yeah, because Sound of Music is a love story set in the Second World War. Half of a Yellow Sun is a love story set in the Nigerian Civil War. And for me, I mean, my student didn't see it from my point of view, and I let her did what she wanted to do, and she did pass it.
That would have been beautiful.
Scored good marks, but she didn't see. I think she didn't see Sound of Music from that point of view of something set in war. To be able to see how, okay, in the case of Sound of Music, there was no influence of a prospective mother-in-law in the thing, but Half of a Yellow Sun, I mean, there was. And these are some of the typical African dynamics that set us apart and which must be reflected in whatever we do, because these media are supposed to be mirrors of our life.